Welcome to my podcast story, the show where podcasters share the real journey behind their voices, from their first mic check to their biggest milestones. Every episode reveals the lessons, challenges, and breakthrough that shape a podcast star's journey. I'm your host, Wisdom Okonkwo, and I can't wait for you to hear today's story. Tell us your name and what you do.
My name is Alan Katz. I used to make movies and TV shows. Now I'm a podcaster, a very proud podcaster.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast, Alan.
It is a pleasure to be with you as always, Wisdom.
Yeah, tell us about your podcast.
It's the timing of our conversation today could not be better. I literally... Well, the past couple of weeks have been quite interesting for my little podcasting company. We went from having 5 podcasts out to 9 podcasts out in the marketplace. We just dropped 4 new podcasts this week on top of one of our podcasts, a brand new podcast we just started dropping less than a month ago, the first episode, called John Kiriakou's Dead Drop, and the numbers are explosive. We'll probably do between 12 to 15,000 listener downloads the first month. Yeah. And
I am flabbergasted.
When I saw that we were going to do that with those numbers with John's podcast, I had been talking to a friend of mine named John Kiriakou, who is an ex-CIA officer. John might be one of the most famous spies in the whole world. He is the guy who was the whistleblower who ratted out America's torture program. When we learned that during the War on Terror, we were waterboarding people, torturing them. And John Kiriakou was the former counterterrorism CIA officer who told an ABC journalist that we were doing that to people, and that ended the torture program. So John, he spent 23 months in federal prison for having done that. He is a remarkable person with a remarkable story. He's told his own story many times before. He's written books, he's done movies, but he's never told his story the way that we're telling it in this podcast. And John also does 2 other podcasts, but he's never told this. He's told the story. He's never told his story. Yeah. And what we're doing in John Kiriakou's Dead Drop, and I think that's one of the reasons why we're getting such an incredible response to it, it's because in a podcast, our one obligation is do not bore the audience. Yeah. So long as you don't bore the audience, you can go as granular as you want. You want to go mitochondrial granular? Go mitochondrial granular. Just don't bore the audience. So long as the audience wants you to go to that level and they see how the story, well, in this case, I wanted to take the listeners inside the head of this spy who he was a golden boy. When he was recruited by a CIA legend, and then he had a meteoric career of a kind, being in the right place at the right time with the right skill set. And he was 25 years old, and he's briefing the president about things. I mean, and an incredible career that this guy felt he could not. He felt morally obligated to tell the world that the company he worked for was doing this terrible thing. And I want to take the audience inside John's head at that moment when he decides he must do this, and I want them to be there with him in every way, shape, and form. I want them to understand exactly how, well, hopefully they'll feel like it's we got there, and they would do exactly what John did. And I want to... Now, when we first started working on the podcast, I thought we would tell this part of John's story because the podcast is more than just John's story. Yeah. This is just the first story we're telling. I thought we were doing it in 3, 4, 5 episodes, and then we began talking about it, and next it was, okay, maybe 10 episodes. And then it expanded into, I don't know how many episodes it's going to take to tell this story on the granular level, because we discovered, all these little bits and pieces are important. They add up. because it's a podcast, as long as I don't bore the audience, we can take a rather novelistic approach.
Yeah.
And that's part of the joy of podcasting, why it's such an incredible creative environment where you can do things you can't do in any other environment because, well, okay, first of all, it's a book, your editor will tell you, who's going to read all these words? Nobody.
Yeah.
If you're doing it as a TV series, well, scripts aren't about lots of words. You got to reduce the number of words. And man, they're expensive to make, and
productions.
Like, you're going to start down that road like they're going to shoot the story you wanted to make. Are you crazy? Of course, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you do the same thing as a podcast, you can tell the story exactly the way you believe it needs to be told. There will be nobody in an executive suite telling you what to do. Now, look, you won't make the money, but the odds of you making money doing it as a TV series or a movie anyway are infinitesimally small. And hey, the moment they go to pay you a penny, you will have to sign away the rights to this thing in its entirety. It's the nature of film and television distribution. You can't have some writer guy going, I got problems with it being distributed to Moldova. No, you can't have that. The distributor of the product must be able to distribute it everywhere.
Yeah.
Unfettered by some silly writer.
Yeah.
And so, so you write at the jump. If you're going to get paid anything, you have to surrender all your ownership forever and perpetuity throughout the known universe is how it's how it's worded in the certificate of authorship that you have to sign.
You mentioned that first month the podcast is doing 12 to 15,000 downloads.
Yeah.
I'm curious, how this is something that I love podcasters. In a year, they don't get up to that amount of downloads, like total. And we're having a show, 12 to 15,000. How did the show get launched or promoted? I don't know what the word would be, but how did the company do that?
I'd been working with John on another podcast, and then the last election kind of made that it was politically, no, you can't, we can't do that podcast, but we wanted to do something together. We'd been toying with another idea. Then, it's now about 6 weeks ago, John calls me. He says, "Hey, I'm going to be doing the Joe Rogan podcast." And you are? I said, well, in that case, your podcast is now in production. Because there's no point you going on that show and saying, and I'm working on a podcast. Who cares? Who cares? That's like, and I think tomorrow I'll have dinner, or maybe I won't. I don't know. It really, unless it's a happening thing, it's not. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. Yeah.
So we rushed it into production, and we said, I live in Los Angeles. He lives in Virginia. He flew here for a week, and we banged together. We did interviews every day, and we created enough content for 5 or 6 episodes, and he had a bunch of other things to do in other parts of the world. And he's going to come back in about several weeks to do another week of. But when he went on the Rogan show, he was not allowed to mention the podcast. But the Rogan, it was a 2-hour interview, and John did all the talking. And really, because Rogan just wanted to hear his story, and that's fair enough. Hey, look, it's Joe Rogan's podcast. He can make the rules. And he didn't want, I understand then, didn't want someone on his air selling stuff. I get that. He wanted to interview this person. You tell your story the way that I want you to tell it. That's perfectly cool. So Joe Rogan also has a huge YouTube YouTube channel, and so I went to the comments and said, hey, if you like the interview, you should check out his new podcast. And so we dropped that a couple of times.
Yeah.
So that was the only promotion that we did. I am fortunate here in that John was a pre-existing brand. He does a couple of other podcasts. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got a presence. What John has always wanted to do is take his story and make it big.
Yeah.
What my company does, and what that a great story must be told the right way in order to be a great story. It's very easy to take a great story and undercut it and make it underwhelming. And it's simply a matter of either framing or how you tell the story. What I do is, regardless of what the story is, I've got this perspective. And I tend to see things from somewhat outside the box. And that's what I'm always after, to see things from a slightly different perspective that reveals things about the story that we've never considered before. That's what I'm after. With John's story, it was really to take it that granular. And as John said to me at one point during our interviews, he said, I usually blow through this story in 10 minutes, but man, we're going to spend an hour on it. Well, yeah.
Well, you talked about
that was
you
it.
talked about your company. Well, at the end of the day, before we even get to your company, from John's story, it's clear that when the core, the promise of the story, right, the person, the message, the content, the story itself is clear, the promotion itself kind of works itself. Even though you do it, it's not as friction based as when the story. It's like selling a product. If the product is trash, even if you do promotion,
you must know. All right, telling a story is only half of our job.
Yeah.
Selling the story is the other half, whether you do it or not. If you don't do that half, well, the telling part is not going to get seen by very many people. Selling the story is an important part of telling the story, and understanding that you are obligated. If you want to tell the story, you got to figure out how to sell the story too.
One of the things that most people make with podcasts is that the basis, the podcast itself, they've not spent time actually refining the idea, the promise of the podcast, such that when it comes to promoting it,
that's right. You were making a great point.
Yeah.
You must know, what is your podcast about? Okay. What is your franchise? Now, an example with John's, with Dead Drop, John Kiriakou's Dead Drop, the subtitle is "What Makes a Spy Tick." Oh. That's it. That is the franchise. It's about the inner workings of a spy's mind. Yeah. And that's why the first story that we're telling, the subtitle of this series of episodes is "What Makes This Spy Tick." And so we're simply being incredibly faithful to the franchise and kind of burning what the franchise is into the audience's head, that this is what we do in this podcast. We will tell you, we will take you inside a spy's head so deeply you will know what makes certainly this spy tick, or any spy tick. And that is always my storytelling goal. And with all the majority of, well, a lot of our podcasts are story podcasts, but I just started dropping a few that they're conversational podcasts, but they've got a strong story hook to them. And that's the key. You understand between the title and just the way that the host explains the podcast, you understand immediately what the podcast is about. And if it's going to be of interest to you, hopefully that's why you've tuned in. Within the first 30 seconds, you know whether it's for you or not. And if you know that it's for you, hopefully we will engage you and you will keep coming back. But it is very important right off the bat, because people will make their decision very quickly. Help them. Help them by being quite definitive about what it is that you're telling and selling.
I would love to know about your company, your podcast company. How did it get started? Tell me a little bit about the podcast comprising of this company.
It kind of came together. It just it's rather, as my entire podcast journey, I suspect, like all of our podcast journeys, we're all making this up as we go along. I used to have a little movie and TV company, and this had to be something new. And during my very brief acting career, I performed in 2 Shakespearean plays. I played the part of Costered in Love's Labour's Lost, and I played the part of Touchstone in As You Like It. both those characters, Costered and Touchstone, are wise fools who fight power. Their whole point is to truth to power, to speak truth to power. I can remember that, speak truth to power. They're wise fools who speak truth to power. My little company is called Costered and Touchstone Productions, and I see us as a wise fool who speaks truth to power. Now, I kind of, during the pandemic, I've always been grateful to Hebrew school for making me the atheist I am today. But I've always been fascinated by religion. I'm not a rejectionist atheist. I'm fascinated by religion. I lived in the Silver Lake area of Los Angeles, and part of the social circle I had when my kids were growing up, there was a guy named Randy Lovejoy, and we were social friends. Our sons played on the same basketball team, and so I knew Randy socially in all these different ways. I didn't know what he did for a living, and when I learned what he did for a living, he was a pastor in a Presbyterian church in the Silver Lake community. He became the sexiest man alive to me. Suddenly, I thought, we have to have lunch now. Now I got to know everything about you. And we began having lunch and having these wonderful conversations. And then the pandemic came, and we missed having our lunches together. And so we started a podcast called the Theism Project Podcast. And the premise was an atheist and a Presbyterian pastor walk into a podcast together, and here's what happens. And it was rather raw. We both were not terribly good on mic, really talking all over each other. Really, there's a learning curve. And we were, hey, the great thing is I think 5 people heard that podcast in its entirety just as well. But we both really enjoyed the process. The pandemic finishes. During the pandemic, now I used to, among the projects I did when I was in movies and TV, I used to do I wrote and produced a show for HBO called Tales from the Crypt, rather famous horror show. The fan group, and this is 25 years ago, 30 years ago that I made that show, but it's now experiencing a resurgence, and it's got a lot of fans all over the place, and a fan group from around the country formed during the pandemic. There were 3 guys. They happened to be Tales from the Crypt fans and fathers, and the podcast was called Dads from the Crypt. And they reviewed all the episodes of Tales from the Crypt and gave parenting advice. One of the dads reached out to me. He said, "Hey, we're going to be reviewing one of the episodes you wrote. You want to sit in with us?" And I said, "That sounds like fun. Okay, sure, Jason." And I sat in with them, and it was great fun. And then a few weeks later, he reached out again. He said, "We're going to be reviewing." We did 2 feature films when I did Tales from the Crypt. A really good one called Demon Night. And from the audience's point of view, it was just a mediocre horror film. The second one, Bordello of Blood. But making the movie completely undid me. It was a terrible, terrible experience that completely undermined.
Terrible in a good way or terrible in a bad way? What kind of terrible are you talking about?
It was a terrible experience. It was my own personal Waterloo. And it basically, I went from being on the cusp of having a really great showbiz career to not having a showbiz career at all, to basically falling off showbiz mountain entirely. And I spent 2 decades wishing I could get back into it, but it's really hard it's hard enough to get on showbiz mountain, but when you get cast off, wow, man, it was hard. It was the thing that propelled my expulsion from showbiz mountain was making that movie Bordello of Blood. It was just devastating consequences to my career. So when Jason from Dads from the Crypt said, "Hey, we're going to be reviewing Bordello of Blood. You want to have another conversation?" I said, "Jason, the story of the making of that movie is not a half-hour conversation with you. It's a podcast unto itself." And that became the impetus for my first real podcast, where I told a story. And that was the first season of the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, which was subtitled The Making of Bordello of Blood. And my goal in telling the story was to tell the story with absolute honesty. And there were a couple of people I wanted to call out. There was the lead actor in my movie, an actor in another movie, and myself. I really, this was my mea culpa because I was not a good producer. It wasn't. Yeah, there are a lot of things I could have done better. I could not. No one was going to save that movie. But I could have been a better, I was in a leadership position and I didn't act like it. And I needed to I needed to say my truth. And telling the story with such honesty, Entertainment Weekly called it the best movie podcast of 2022, which was rather flattering, very nice of them to say, but it was the honesty. And I loved that one could tell a story in this medium in podcasting with such honesty. That was gratifying as a storyteller. It was gratifying every which way. As I was going into subsequent seasons, a friend reached out to me with a story he wanted to turn into a TV series, and I told him, no, you don't. First of all, they'll make you compromise everything, and at the end of the day, it won't turn out the way you want, and you'll get screwed financially. I said, no, let's do it as a podcast. And that became the first flat-out produced story podcast, which was called The Donor, a DNA Horror Story. Yeah. And that was, and the research I had to do on that one about the donor-conceived world introduced me to a woman named Donna Hall, who became the subject of my second story podcast, The Hall Closet. Wow. And when I was in the middle of producing The Hall Closet with Donna, telling her amazing story.
Quick break. Before we continue, I'd love to invite you to join the My Podcast Story newsletter. Each week, I share highlights from our guest stories, behind-the-scenes podcasting tips, and resources to help you grow your own show. You can sign up at mypodcaststory.com/join. That is mypodcaststory.com/join. Now, let's get back to the episode.
I realized I had become the thing I always wanted to be when I grew up, which was a podcaster. And from that point on, I had no desire to do movies or TV ever again. Why spend all that time when, gosh, I can actually have a finished product in front of an audience and I still own it 100%. It's so much better. And I can tell the story exactly the way I think it needs to be told. Then somehow I seem to begin attracting projects, and I now have 9 podcasts out in the world. I just launched 3 new ones this week, and the second season of The Hall Closet. I've got 12 more podcasts in various stages of pre-production, and lots more coming after that. This is exactly the thing I want to be doing. I would not want to do anything else. Just 2 weeks ago, I was invited up to Vancouver, British Columbia. It's the 30th anniversary of a feature film I wrote and produced called Demon Knight, the first Tales from the Crypt feature film. And there was a 30th anniversary screening as the lead-off event to a horror film festival in Vancouver. And they very kindly, they flew me up and a couple of the actors up, and they put us up, and they treated us very nicely for 3 days. And God, I had a point to this story. It just went out of my head. It's late here. It's the end of a working day.
They flew you, they had you, and yes, you said that.
It had to do with Demon Knight. Well, God, I'm so sorry. Wisdom, it went right out of my head. It's the end of a long working day. It's been 13 hours and sitting in front of this microphone, and the last few brain cells are kind of dribbling out my ears. I apologize. I lost my train of thought there. Oh, damn! Right at the good part of the story too. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, you mentioned 12 podcasts and even more. And you said that.
Oh, yes. That's right. Thank you. You mentioned the word podcast. What I said to everyone up there, why would anyone want to make a movie? I understand if you can get to the finish line, but it's such a rare opportunity. I walked away from that. Two of the actors who were there at the screening want to do podcasts with me. You know, they'll continue with their careers, but they saw that as a creative outlet. Yeah, I knew I'd find the story. Thank you, Wisdom. You got me there. That as a creative enterprise, as a way to be a creative in this world, this is the best possible creative medium for you, because you really can. You can write, produce, distribute, and that's the key. You can distribute your written, produced content. Then you can monetize and collect on the monetization all by yourself without anybody else interfering. The only person who will take a cut is the credit card company. They'll get their cut, but otherwise it's all yours, and you still own it 100%. Now, you might not make the kind of money you might have made the other way, but hey, nobody's making that money these days. And if there's enough for you to be making that kind of money, trust me, you're not making the most of it. Everybody else is making the most of that money, not you, the originator of the idea. Yeah. Why would you want to do that to yourself and your idea? You both deserve so much more, don't you?
Yeah. I think the freedom that comes with podcasting for most creators, it's empowering, but also it's scary, because now you're like, it's like I give you a blank paper and like, create anything you want. That itself is scary sometimes.
Oh yeah. Oh hey, I think the worst thing you can do for yourself as a creative at the beginning of any creative day is to stare up at the universe and go, okay, what shall I write today? Oh gosh, don't do that to yourself. You really should do this for yourself. Walk into every day knowing before you sit down to write what it is you're going to write that day. The problem to be solved shouldn't be what shall I write, is how shall I write this? That should always be the problem. What I've always liked to do is the night before I'm going to write something, think about it. And then I will let my brain cogitate subconsciously. Now, I can only speak for myself because that's the only writer I can speak for. But I've always found that by doing that little bit of prep the night before, when I sit down to write, suddenly whatever it is, the homework that my brain did, and hopefully it's better doing this homework than I ever was when I went to school, suddenly you've done all this pre-thinking, and you're not hitting the ground at a walk or a trot. You are hitting the ground mentally running because you've been pre-thinking about it.
Your company, your podcast company, what does the team look like?
The team?
Yeah, is there a team?
You're looking at it. This is the team. This is a one-person operation. Now, there are my podcasting partners, the people whose stories I'm helping to tell, but this is completely a one-person operation. It's funny.
That's fantastic.
As I look around at other podcasting operations, I was just researching another one today, called Evergreen, and the Who Are We? And they do quite a few podcasts. They do a lot of podcasts. They must do 24 podcasts. There must be 12 people working for them.
Yeah.
12 people. Wow. Now, hey, I'm blown away. I hope they're all getting paid, and that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing.
What did you call the podcast network? Evergreen.
Evergreen is a network. Is a network of podcasts. Yeah, you can look them up. They do a lot of podcasts.
Wow.
And they have a staff of people.
Wow.
Okay. There are other. I listen to a lot of podcasts.
I would love some of those recommendations. I'm thinking of starting my own network. Probably start one for my country, so I can dominate.
But think big. Think big. Yes. Hey, why not be the emperor as much as you possibly can? Yeah. But hey, be someone always is going to think bigger than other people. It might as well be you. It might as well.
Yeah, the reason I thought about that is my country is about 200 million people, and podcasting is something it's like in the US, in Canada, in Australia, like that's people like how do I put it now? There are people that are crushing it. Like Yeah, awesome. But I feel like there's so much information, there's so much stories, there's so much things that could actually be brought to limelight and focus. But nobody's telling those stories in Nigeria.
You're thinking the right way. You are so thinking the right. You absolutely are, really and truly. Hey, someone has to be the first to create an industry, a Nigerian podcasting industry. You said there were how many people?
Over 200 million people.
200 million people.
Yeah.
The thing about podcasting is that you don't need a complicated piece of equipment. If they have a phone, you can reach these people, and then it's simply a matter. Like I said, it's the telling part. It's the selling part of the story. Once you create an entity that people trust, and that's part of it. Hey, but that's branding. You're on your way to creating this because you've already got a body of work and a catalog and the skill set. Really, it's just the evolution of the next piece into whatever this entity is that becomes the go-to place for podcasting in your country. And all you have to do is really, you've already imagined what it is. Now you just have to literally fill in the blanks. Okay, give it a name, give it a logo, write a quick mission statement so that everyone understands what it is that you are putting forward, and you've already said what it is. You know what it is. You know you could do this in your sleep. You could tap this out right now as we're talking, probably, and then it's just a matter of executing, of creating the content within the context of that franchise that you're creating. And my model is to create as much diverse content as I possibly can. Yeah, the trick really becomes scheduling. And yeah, that's to keep all these plates spinning at the same time. Some are weekly, and I will produce, they get less production because production takes time. And some that, all right, one of my bigger podcasts, Just the Photographer with David Swanson, we decided to go every other week because it's production intensive. And I'm also going every other week with Dead Drop, and we're dropping mini episodes on the odd weeks because we got to keep the numbers going. And I didn't want it to flag. It's still got to be good content of a certain duration so that it's legitimate, and we're doing that. But I figured out a way to handle the production in various ways, and so that everything could get serviced. And it's important to keep up, it's about branding, and the brand has to have there's a certain quality level that I want. I insist that my podcast maintain. Well, the person responsible for that is me. So the only person who can screw that up is me.
Yeah.
But that's okay. I would love to hire a couple of people. The only problem with hiring a couple of people is you have to interview them. It takes time to find the right people. They don't just fall from the sky.
Yeah, but when you do, it's worth it.
And if I interview, to get that one good person, I might have to interview 5 people. That's 4 interviews of people. Might be perfectly good, but they're not going to work as well as the other person. That's probably 4 hours of, relatively speaking, dead time. When I got a heavy production schedule. So
getting one good person, it's like it's super worth it.
And finding the right person is not exactly, well, yeah, I'll look out for the person. And it's not that there aren't good people. It's you got to find the right person for this particular assignment. And the chemistry has to be right between us.
About the vision.
And look, I got to be the right opportunity for them, just as they have to be the right opportunity for me. It has to, if you really want it to work out where you're going to get the best out of everybody, and 1 + 1 will equal 1,000. It's harder than it looks, and it doesn't look so easy. Oh. So, to a degree, that's my other problem. All right, in my fantasy, but maybe not. My goal is, by presenting my company as a certain thing, and now that we're beginning to demonstrate that we are commercially, some of our podcasts are commercially viable, that, okay. It's a matter of scaling up. If an investor were to look in our direction and say, we like what you're doing, we'd like to own a piece of it, and here's my mind is quite open. I would like that to happen. Now, hey, you could do exactly the same thing, because what I'm doing here, you can do. Well, hey, when I say here, there, we can do this all over the entire world.
All over the world.
Our reach is there are no borders. There are no borders.
It's just a question of choice.
but you happen to have a market available to you that is not available to me, that you can exploit. And I don't mean exploit in the negative sense, but that you could service. Maybe that's a better word. That you could service and create an entity that people would recognize as a great place to go for news, entertainment, spiritual relief. Really and truly, all you have to do is create the content, and again, it's a matter of brand building. Takes time. It's a piece at a time, and so we're going to create this podcast, and then this podcast, and the goal is you're looking for various different kinds of content that a wide audience would come to, and hopefully when they see, wow, I really like that podcast. Oh, you do other podcasts? Well, what else do you do? Suddenly each podcast could become the spur for any of the other podcasts there in that podcasting network or family, I think I'd rather call them a family.
Wow. One other part I'm curious about is the partnership, because with doing a really big podcast network, there's a level you can actually do your own podcast too, right? At some point, you have to partner with other creators that are like crazily good at what they do, right? What does the partnership look like? Because that part, it's kind of tricky to me. I'm like, how do this like?
Here's how I do it. Here's the agreement that I have with my podcasting partners that I crafted. The way that because it's about a relationship. It's about a relationship between creative people. A story needs a great storyteller to achieve whatever greatness it will achieve. So this is a 1 + 1 = relationship. And what we are working on, what I describe it as a unique interpretation of some piece of their life that we will tell via this podcast. And so I carve out a very particular thing using the words unique interpretation of story. So the podcast is not their life story. I cannot claim any rights to it. It's the unique interpretation as it is manifested in the podcast. That is the only thing to which I have rights to which I have rights in any of their lives. Now, if someone who made movies and TV shows said, wow, I love that podcast, and they went to this person and said, I want to do your life, the podcast version of your life. If they say, I want to do your life, I don't care about the podcast. Well, nothing to do with me. If they say, I love how it's in the podcast, well, then I'm entitled.
Let's turn into a movie. Yeah.
So I'm trying, the goal is to be very clear about the definition of terms, what it is that we're working on, and the understanding that it is a 50-50. What I also do, because we're creating a podcast together, the podcast, all right, the ownership in it is 50-50 because story plus storyteller, but that's the profits. That's profits. First, the thing has to get paid for. And though I'm going to say we make podcasts for nothing, that is not true. We might not be getting paid yet, but that doesn't mean that we're doing it for free. So in every one of these podcasts has a budget. I've got it's something of an arbitrary number. I use a number between $7,500 and $10,000 an episode. If I was the week it takes to make an episode, if I was paying people, fair market value for their skills and talents, that's probably what an episode would cost, and a little bit for the company. Because to me, it's important that before we can ever say anything's in profits, everyone has to get paid for their work first. Everyone who worked on the podcast, host, producer, sound editor, and even if it's the same person in a lot of cases, you still have to get paid for your work. Now, in my case, a host and the person who did all the work are two different people, but everyone gets paid for their work because nobody works for free. So that's part of it. And the company gets a piece because the company is doing things that I think entitle it to a slice of whatever the income is. And once the cost of production, if it's $7,500 for an episode, once $7,500, that threshold has been reached and everyone's been paid, well, then you're in profit. And every dollar that episode of podcast makes after that cost threshold has been reached, well, that's profit. And hey, if you continue to add advertising dollars or whatever the monetization schemes are, now you're into profits and it's gravy. But you got to pay for it before you can get to the gravy.
Yeah.
So that's how I structure it with my partners, so that everyone understands that you will get paid as soon as there is money coming in, because you will get paid a portion of what you are owed.
Yeah.
And we will, we break it down into a percentage, because if you were going to get a percentage of the cash in, that's how you can see it. Then that's how we'll divvy it up now, so no one has to feel like they're waiting forever. Hey, it's not like there's a ton of dollars that we're talking about. We might be talking about $20, $30. We might be, but my goal is everyone gets paid if there's money.
Well, thank you so much for that. This episode has been so much ideas, and I'm curious what the ideas will eventually turn into. Coming up with the brands and all that.
I suspect we're going to continue to have this conversation.
Yeah,
especially.
I was Alan, I just did something. What are your thoughts?
Hearing what you're thinking about excites the hell out of me. Wow. I am so excited I want to help you launch that in whatever small dumb way I can. I love that idea. I love that idea for you. I want to see you soar, man. I want to see you become everything that you have the potential to be. And there's, oh my God, you're such a talented guy. Soar, my friend, soar.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll let you know, with the progress, and so this is it, and so we can bounce idea of each other. We talked about your company, and we also talked about the podcast you've been launching. If listeners want to connect with you and also learn more about the work you're doing, where can they do that?
Costered and Touchstone.com is the collecting point for everything we do. You can find links to all of our podcasts and also information about coming attractions. We've got, like I said, there are lots of different podcasts on the drawing board, and some closer to fruition than that. All of that is at costeredandtouchstone.com. COSTARDAND, Touchstone, TOUCHSTONE.com. Costered and Touchstone. You can find our podcast wherever you listen. Maybe you find your favorite podcast. We're everywhere.
I'll put the links in the description and the show notes, so listeners can click and go directly to the site. Thank you so much, Alan.
The pleasure is always mine, and man, am I excited for your future.
Yeah. That's it for today's episode of my podcast story. I hope you enjoyed listening to this journey as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. If you found value in today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a review. It really helps others discover the show. And don't forget to join the newsletter at mypodcaststory.com/join for more stories and podcasting insights. Until next time, keep telling your story, because someone out there needs to hear it.